Hey everyone, welcome to the today's stream. As you all know, it's the AMA session for the blockchain for the beginners with Neo. And today with us we have Joe, Betty, and Tyler for your respective doubts. So hi to everyone.
Hello,
So,
everyone.
So guys, to begin with, just to break the ice. So how are you all? Like, is it all good over there? And how's the work? Just to break the ice, and we'll move ahead with the question. So how has it all been since the COVID has begun and like it has been a tough time? So what impact it had on you guys like overall? To begin with, Betty, you want to say something?
Hmm. Sorry, I think I cannot catch your questions.
No, I was saying, COVID has been a massacre basically. So, like, how it has been, like, due to lockdown or maybe the whole spread over there. So, like, what's the situation over there? So, that's my basic question, just to break the ice.
so mm, maybe I can start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's definitely been interesting here in the United States.
Okay.
I think things are starting to open up. Over the past, I guess it's 18 months or so. It's been, I guess, a good opportunity to do a lot of work and focus on getting N3 ready for the community. So yeah, I guess COVID is what it is, but I'm glad that we're making some progress on overcoming that obstacle.
I do feel community culture has boomed because of COVID. Like every coin has two sides, and I feel the community has grown since everyone was at home and the whole work from home started in the initial phase. That's something which we feel. So, Joe, do you want to say something about it?
You mean how we are doing about new sensory?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of busy during the last month, and everything is on schedule, going well. Um, and I think the contract agreement changed a little bit from the legacy. And we have a new compiler, and um, contract negotiations can be much more easier than before. So I think everything good.
So, to start with the hackathon. So, as we all know, that Neo is sponsoring the Neo is conducting basically the hackathon, which we are over here being the community partners of. So, the hackathon is completely about blockchain. So, we had a lot of doubts regarding the hackathon and also regarding the blockchain as a technology and as a technical stack. So there are the few questions that I wanted you guys to throw some lights on, as you are the experts of the particular field. So I hope it helps the people out there. So first question which we had was how can I build a Neo N3? So like we had around 13 to 14 questions, so like one by one we can move through it. So any of you want to say something on this, or all of you can also add. How can I build Neo N3?
So I guess there are two different ways we could approach that question. The first is from the direction that of building an actual blockchain, or on building a DApp itself on the platform. And three, I think if we're talking about a DApp or an application on the platform specifically, I think the best way to start would be to look at the tutorials that we have available. I think one of the things that we've pushed really hard on is adding support for many different languages. And we've really worked on the ease of use with all of our tools. I think that's a big difference with N3 compared to a lot of other blockchains, and then also compared to even Neo Legacy. So the tools are a lot better. The core protocol is a lot easier to use and more intuitive. And we've worked pretty hard to have some good tutorials as well to help, especially new developers, get started with the platform. I think the other thing that's really important there is that we support a bunch of different languages. So if you want to start with really get started with blockchain development, especially with N3, we have a couple tools that will really help, especially like the Neo Express platform. So you can download that, and in a matter of minutes, you can have a blockchain running on your computer. And then you can pick whichever language you want to write smart contracts in. If you want to use C# or Java or Python or Golang, and even TypeScript, you can just pick whichever language, and we have the tool that's available for that to write a smart contract.
I hope that clears the doubt. Do you guys want to add something else? Joe or Betty?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Tyler. I think new has a diversity in the report for one language. It's the most. I think it's most advantage than the other blockchain systems. So, my first language was C#. But you know, C# is the main language that I was using. But I can still use. We have a relevant activity, for we have a complex project in Europe, and I also had a Golang for I did Golang script for Golang contract management Europe.
Yes, I used to use Java before I joined the new, and for nearly 2 years. And after I come here, thanks to the rich documentations, and I can catch up the new language like C#, TypeScript, and Python quickly. Like recently, I have involved in some tasks that like new ID and high speed using Oracle and other projects. Yes, I think Neo is good enough for developers who using different languages. Since we have the rich documentations that you can refer to. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, to add on to that, I mean, we're talking about it taking maybe 30 minutes to an hour to have somebody writing their first smart contract and then invoking it with like JavaScript, for example, to interface with the blockchain. So it's really, really quick.
It's actually quick. It's pretty quick. So to follow up, same a question on the same domain we had. How can I use the new virtual machine, basically? So
You mean the new machine?
yeah,
Um,
So there are a couple different components to that question. Also, I think from an implementation standpoint, if somebody wants to implement their own version of NVM, they can. We've done that multiple times within the community. So a good example of that is the Mamba project, right? And actually our Golang NeoGo project also supports and has its own implementation of the Neo virtual machine in its code. So we actually, in the community, we have a C# implementation, and then we also have a Golang implementation as well as a C++ implementation. So it's designed in a way for people to take it and to re-implement it and expand it out from there. I know that like the ontology team, for example, also has implemented NVM as well in the past. So it's really designed to do that. If we're talking about a use perspective, I think the VM architecture of Neo really, it gives us that ability to write smart contracts in multiple languages, because effectively what we're doing, if we look at, and I'll use the Python compiler as an example, or BOA, but this is the same for Go or C# as well, or Java. When you write code, you're not actually writing true like native C# or Python or Java, right? You're writing something that's, for example, in Python, it's called Pythonic, right? So it's a language that looks and behaves a lot like Python, but then what we're doing is we're using a tool that translates that code that you wrote in kind of this Python language into bytecode, which can then be run on NVM. So if you're familiar with like the Java language, for example, right? It operates somewhat similarly to that in concept, right, with the virtualization. And that gives us a lot of flexibility. As I mentioned, we can support multiple general purpose programming languages instead of requiring or forcing developers to use one specific option. So anytime you're actually, when you write a smart contract and you compile it down into bytecode and deploy it, you're using the VM right then. Every time you send a transaction, you're using the VM. Like you're always using the VM. Every single interface with the blockchain, within reason, any complex one at least, is using the VM. So
That actually answers the questions.
Yeah. Every time you use the smart contract inside the new, you are using the new virtual machine, because then the virtual machine can only understand the block code, right? You deal with human readable, not human readable, like mobile programming, for example, as HR, Python, Golang, they have related compilers to convert to a code that new virtual machine can understand.
I think that answers the question. So one more question which we had was, I have built a project using Python and JS. How can I port this to Neo?
okay. So I think the first thing to do, and this is more of a product implementation question. The first thing that I think that anyone who is doing that needs to evaluate is whether their project makes sense on blockchain, or whether the goal of the project, the utility, makes sense in a decentralized architecture. I think that's something that's really important for people to understand or think about, because blockchain intrinsically won't make your project better, right? It's just another tool. It's like using a database, for example. Like some projects need a database and other projects don't need a database. If you just take a database and stick it on your project for no reason, then it's a lot of work for you and you don't get any value. So it's really important, I think, for you to evaluate and understand what that is. The next thing to do is, once you've decided that it works and it makes sense, you would want to install probably Neo Express, and then also probably BOA, which is the Python compiler for smart contracts. And then depending on if you want to interface using Python or JavaScript, if you want to use Python, you would install a tool called Mamba. And if you want to interface in JavaScript, you would install Neon.js, which is the JavaScript SDK. And then those tools will allow you to interact with the blockchain directly. So if you write your smart contract in Python, you can compile it and deploy it to Neo Express. And then from the Python side, you could talk to or interface with the smart contract using Mamba. And if you wanted to do it from a client side or even a backend from a TypeScript or JavaScript environment, you would use Neon.js for that. But yeah, that's how we generally recommend approaching it. I think the most important piece is to evaluate the project and see if it makes sense with blockchain first. Since by introducing blockchain into any project, there are design constraints that you introduce. And those can impact your project architecture pretty substantially. So it is really important to make sure that when you're picking tools for your projects, that you make the right decision, because you will have to live with those decisions for the entire life of the project, in a lot of cases. But yeah, that's the general approach. I definitely, for me personally, the tech stack that I usually use is BOA and then Neon.js, but I've also used the C# platform quite a bit for contract development. But that's generally what I use. But I also, I have a bias towards not having a backend for my project. So I prefer to, if possible, just have a front end and then have that directly interface with the blockchain exclusively.
Yeah. So just to add up to this question, this is not a question, I just want to add something to it. What do you guys think, usually when we talk about blockchain, when we say blockchain, so the general mindset of the crowd is that people think that it's related to crypto. When you say blockchain, they say crypto. So what are the different applications, or maybe different aspects, as you were saying, Tyler, that it can be used? Does your product need a blockchain base behind it? So what do you think, what can be the project, for an exemplar project that can have a blockchain as its base? What can that project be?
So I can use a really good example, and this actually works really well with Betty here as well. I think identity is a really important one, and a really good example of this. And actually, I think pretty much all of we have a kind of these sub platforms or tools that are built into the new N3 platform. They all are actually really good use cases. And one of the example of identity is really interesting. So right now, for example, if you want to do maybe a credit check to buy land, for example, right? All of that information and the person that passes judgment on that or decides if they want to issue that is held by a central authority. You don't actually really own that information. That also applies for things like medical records, right? Those are actually owned by a private entity, and you have to make a request to them to give that information to somebody else, right? That also applies to your academic credentials as well. They're owned, and this is a cultural thing, so this may not apply globally. I know in Singapore, for example, this isn't the case with academics, but with academics credentials, the university owns them. And actually in the United States, the university has a partnership with a private company that sells your academic credentials if you need to verify your education. So say I want to get a job and I need to verify my degree. I have to actually pay a private company to give out the proof that I have that degree. And they can say no. They don't legally have to give that information, right? So that's a huge risk for me that there's some gatekeeper controller that proof, right, or evidence. So I think identity is actually one of those areas where there's a really viable use case there, since you own who you are. Those certificates, those qualifications should also be owned by you, and you should be the authority that decides when they're issued or shared. I look at things like decentralized exchanges. I think that's important. Both, and you mentioned kind of crypto. I think there are a lot of cryptocurrency starts to become kind of a gray area when you start looking at like digitization of other financial instruments besides like Dogecoin, for example, right? When you start looking at people putting like actual digital currency analogs, secure, like actual security. So we have like security tokens, for example. The kind of concept of what a cryptocurrency is, that line kind of blurs. Another one that just to point out would be one of the other tools that's built into N3, and that's NeoFS. So decentralized storage is also another option there for us to discuss regarding the value proposition. And it's generally within blockchain, a really good way to look for a use case and to think about it is if there's a gatekeeper who can shut something down in a way that they shouldn't be allowed to do or able to do, primarily for some technological reason, then blockchain is probably a good fit. So storage, for example, I'm not positive where this data from this AMA is being stored or hosted or where the calculation is being done, but I can guarantee that it's on some central server, right? And if they wanted to, whoever runs this platform, they can turn it off, right? If they didn't like whatever the content was or they disagreed with it or whatnot, they could flip a switch and then we would not be able to have this AMA, right? So this is actually a really good example of a project that would make sense on blockchain, right? And we do have the tools in N3 to build something like this in a decentralized way, between both the NeoFS platform, and then we also have a cloud service provider, like a CSP type of decentralized compute project also building on N3 as well. So I hope those are a couple examples.
So we were going through a lot of questions and many were around cryptocurrency. There were a lot of questions and many were around that same concept of cryptocurrency, because people usually, as you give some light on the topic, people usually go around when they hear about blockchain, when they hear about decentralized, they just what they think, what they're generally thinking is Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and Elon Musk is the person that comes up to their mind, which is not directly related to the crypto in any way. So moving to the next question. What are NFTs and how can we use them? So Betty, do you want to say something on this, on NFTs?
Oh, NFT is a non-fungible token. Yes, actually, everything in that is tokenized as NFT token should be unique. I think that is the most important features of the NFT tokens. Yeah. NFT tokens features some features like the fungible tokens, like we can transfer the NFT token to others, and taking the name service as the example. Actually, we have implemented non-native smart contract for the name service that to actually the name service can be tokenized as an NFT token that people can register, means that it means to mint a NFT token, and it can hold some properties that can be recorded on chain. And also we can transfer the NFT tokens to others in a host. That means we can not transfer the portion of the token. We have to transfer the whole tokens to others. Yeah. That is pretty much I can think about it. That's all. Thank you.
So I think it's important to, again, this kind of depends on the level of the audience for this AMA, but an NFT, the main distinction of an NFT between what we call like a NEP17 token in the N3 ecosystem is that each one has distinct attributes. They're not really commoditized, I guess is the way to put it. Where with a token, like a standard cryptocurrency token, every single one is the same, right? We're actually tracking numbers, right? So I could say I have 100 NFTs, or sorry, 100 tokens, like cryptocurrency tokens, like NEP17 tokens, right? With NFTs, I think a good example would be like maybe Pokemon cards or baseball cards or something like that, right? Where I may say I have 100 baseball cards, but each card has its own distinct properties associated with it that give each one a different value, and maybe each one can do different things. So those would be a good example of something that makes sense as an NFT token. Likewise, a car, for example, may also be an NFT, a good example of an NFT token, like the digital representation of a real car, right? Primarily because each car is unique. They all have their own repair history, right? They all have their own driving history, their own mileage. They all have all of these different properties associated with them. So that would be another good example of something that could be an NFT token. And actually, we just, I think Joe and Betty will have to correct me on this, but I think we just finalized and released a lot of the NEP11 work on N3 as well. And that would be our NFT token standard.
Yeah.
So moving ahead, one of the question was about the hackathon, but very particularly about the whole process. I have installed .NET 5 following the instructions given, but I cannot create a new Neo Express instance. Can you tell me what I am doing wrong?
Sure. We can go through that if you want, live potentially.
Yeah, definitely. That would be really great.
Okay, let's see if we can do this. Let me uninstall .NET, or let me uninstall. It's really quick here. Sorry, I have to open up a different IDE here also. And I actually, Sparsh, I don't know if we can do sharing on two different I have two different connections going. I have two different computers that are logged into this AMA, so I don't know if that's...
Okay. Yeah, it will work. It will work. It will work. You can present from that computer. I'll just pin it up here.
Okay.
You can present from that computer, and I'll pin it over here.
All right, great. I think it's... All right. One second, guys.
Oh, can you explain the basics of getting started with M3?
Yeah. That was the question.
Yeah, that's a good one, I think.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we need to do is, and I'm going to have to uninstall. What is it? .NET. Am I not? Okay, so, and this is an older version. So this should be an environment that's effectively at the same state that yours is in. Okay, so here we have .NET 5 installed, and I've now uninstalled NeoExpress, right? So the first thing that we need to do is install NeoExpress. And I'm going to show you guys what to look at for that. So here's the NeoExpress repository, okay? And you can follow, there's some instructions and some tutorials, but this is actually, I'm going to take a note really quick.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the fact that this question is being asked means that we probably need to improve where to find this information. But
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the releases for NeoExpress, you'll actually see every release because this isn't a production release, right? We're not in mainnet yet. You'll want to use an explicit version to install NeoExpress instead of just saying, if you do .NET tool install -g NeoExpress, just this part, you're going to get probably a downrev version, which may not actually work with the .NET 5 version that you are running, right? You're going to get the latest production release, and these are preview releases. So you can actually just take this code right here and install it like that, and then we'll just wait for it to set up. And this is going to globally install NeoExpress onto your computer, and we're done. So now I have NeoExpress installed, okay? And then what we're gonna do, and we can overwrite our data on here, that's not a problem. And I'm just gonna delete this. Okay. And actually, you know what we're gonna do? I'm gonna open up I'm using PyCharm, by the way. I'm one of the weird people in the Neo ecosystem that doesn't use VS Code, apparently. But bear with me. The process is identical in VS Code. It's actually easier with the toolkit.
Yeah.
But we'll go through here. Okay, so I've changed the project out because I think this is a little easier to look at. And what we're gonna do, and let me just grab some of these files here and get rid of them. So you guys see it's actually like a bare bones environment, right? Okay, so then what we're gonna do, so if you look, what is it, -b. Yep. So there's our Neo Express version that's running or installed, right? And then we're going to want to create a new private net. Okay. So we do neoxt create. Oh, sorry. I keep doing that. I add an E accidentally. Okay. So then you'll see created one node private net. Okay. And then you get a warning, right? I think it's important for people to be aware these private keys only really apply to this private net. You're not going to get access to, I mean, there's nothing on these anyways, so it doesn't matter. But okay. And what that's going to do is it'll actually create this file called default.neoexpress right here. And in that file, you'll see all of the node or the private net settings, right? So you'll see your wallets, you'll see your Genesis wallet. And then one thing that's really important here to note is your ports that are being used to interface, and then also your magic number. This magic number is really important for when you start trying to interface with the blockchain. And it's actually, it may seem frustrating every once in a while if you're jumping between chains and you have to constantly, you get an error in the transaction or something like that. That's actually intentional, and it's meant to prevent people from accidentally sending. That's not true. There are a number of reasons that it exists. One of the big reasons is to prevent people from accidentally invoking something on the wrong network, right? You can imagine if I'm doing development, right, on a private net, and then I accidentally send the transaction to mainnet, right? I could lose potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of tokens, right? Or I could destroy my product. I could destroy the contract. I could do something like that. So that magic number is really a safeguard to help protect people from accidentally doing something on the wrong network. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're just going to start it. So we do neoxp run, and now I have a private net running on the blockchain.
All right.
Or sorry, on in this case, my laptop. So that's running. Say I want to create a wallet, right? I would do neoxp wallet create, and I'm going to name it Neo is awesome.
It surely is.
All right, so now I have my Neo is awesome wallet, and this is the address for it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna do another command, and I'm gonna show you guys how to transfer tokens now. Okay. And we're gonna transfer it. So in Neo Express, and actually Neo in general, all of the tokens, at least the Neo tokens, they're pre-mined or pre-minted. Meaning there's a Genesis account which starts with all of the tokens. For Neo, at least. For gas, that's different.
Yeah.
Right? So what we'll do is we'll do neoxp transfer. And we'll do like, I don't know how many, we'll just do a bunch of gas, right? And we're going to transfer it from that Genesis account to the Neo is awesome account. Okay, and then we're going to wait. And what this is doing is it's relaying the transaction to the blockchain to execute it in this case, it's actually executing in the VM. So in that Neo VM, it's processing that transaction on the smart contract. And if we look back at our blockchain, you'll actually see here we had transaction equals 0, and each one of these is a block, right? That's being minted. You'll see now on this latest block that came up, there's actually transaction equals 1. So that block has that transaction in it. Okay. So that's how to get that private net started. We can go on this topic, I think, for hours developing a full project, but we do have tutorials within the ecosystem that can do very similar things in multiple languages. So I would encourage people to also look there. as well at some of those tutorials and resources. And also the Discord is really helpful.
So,
well.
okay, there was a question in the comment box right now, so I'll just put it up there. Joe was actually answering that earlier. Joe, you're not audible. You might unmute yourself. Unmute.
Hello, Smash.
Yeah, hi.
Okay. Good. Okay. So how to get started with New 3, right?
Yeah.
3. I think we have a very complete documentation for N3. You have to know the basics, like blog. What is the transaction? Um, and for the smart contract development, I think before that you can start it with how to build get familiar with new client, new GUI. That gives you access to the new blockchain. We have a test net for you to test your smart contract. Let me show you like the government documentation. Okay. I will explain some key features of the new entity. Okay. Can you see the screen? Josh, can you see the screen?
Yeah. I add that to the screen. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the documentation of the new 3. So I think before you get started, you better get familiar with those basic concepts like what is a script hash, OP code, smart NP 17. So then you can get started with smart contract development. So I think just Tyler explained how to get started with build a private chain for yourself, and and we have a C# examples here. The best way I think is for the beginners, you can use one node at the first beginning. That's very easy.
So one thing that I'll also add, so Joe is showing some of the Neo CLI implementation for this.
Yeah.
Eventually, as developers, and depending on what you want to do, this is the kind of the production experience, right? So what I showed with Neo Express is designed for development of smart contracts and applications heavily, but then in a production environment, or if you wanted to run a full node and participate within the governance platform and the voting and all of that at a more active level, you would use the Neo CLI solution as well, or instead. And that's what we have up here. So this is actually this is like the true full node that you can run to actually run the VM and consensus within the potentially mainnet or testnet. So there are a lot of there are a lot more features here.
All right. So we have one more question in the comment section, and there's
So this is a philosophical question about what is Web3. Since I think the wherever this came from, and I won't go into that, Web3 is generally associated with the Ethereum space. So I'm going to assume that that's the direction that the question is coming from. Recently, and as a lot of the I think people are starting to understand or realize that there's a need for differentiation of the technology stack away from having a kind of a mono chain kind of solution. People started also using Web3 to kind of comment on the general kind of decentralized ecosystem or the blockchain ecosystem as a whole, especially with regards to smart contract supporting platforms. However, to answer, I think, what the intent of your question is, that is possible. There are definitely some caveats there, and I can go through those really quickly. So the first one is that if you're talking about directly taking like an Ethereum smart contract and putting it on Neo, Neo technically, and this goes back to the VM comment, there's nothing actually preventing somebody from writing a compiler that compiles like Solidity smart contracts, for example, into NVM bytecode to run and execute on the Neo blockchain. So we can do that. There isn't a project or a product in production that is able to take Solidity contracts and compile them, but it is feasible to do. Somebody should work on that project. It would be fun. There is one thing there, though. There are some native features of Ethereum that are different in Neo, which would not be supported, right? So again, I mentioned the difference in the languages, right? Like it's not technically Solidity, it's something else, right? That looks and feels just like Solidity. To use the Pokemon example again, it's kind of like Ditto, the Pokemon.
Yeah.
Using a bunch of Pokemon examples. My kid is into Pokemon right now, so it's on my mind constantly. That being said, so that's one approach. The other thing, if we're talking about Web3, like, is it possible to, if I have a Web3 project and I want to use Neo instead or in addition to, then I think you'll find that it's very easy to add support for Neo on a project that exists in the Web3 ecosystem. That migration or the addition of N3 should be very, very straightforward. Since in theory, your architecture is already designed to support decentralized tools, DLT technologies, and Neo is a DLT technology or distributed ledger technology. So I think it should be very straightforward to add support. Now, if we're talking about the third option, and that would be using Web3 tools that already exist, specifically the smart contracts, through Neo as like a reverse proxy type of solution. There are also some endeavors or some initiatives in our ecosystem working on things like that as well. And that's where some of the work for like Poly Network, for example, comes into play, where we have a true like cross-chain solution for interfacing between multiple blockchains, right? And that would allow somebody to interface with Neo and then have Neo talk to like the very smart contract, for example, to invoke it and get information back.
So that was like, I love the way you explain it, the way you use metaphors, the way you
My
use
Pokemon
analogies.
metaphors.
Yeah.
I think they help like cross-culturally. They help a little bit. They're also a good learning tool. A lot of the time, my metaphors don't work. They're really bad. So
So, using your Pokemon metaphor and moving to the last questions, if today Ethereum and Bitcoin are Charizard and Neo is the Charmander, so what do you think? Will Neo be Charizard of tomorrow?
yeah, so I guess, and this is also a philosophical question. I don't necessarily view Ethereum and Bitcoin as competitors of Neo. I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. I guess the first thing within the blockchain ecosystem, and I think when you get into the ecosystem, there's a lot of infighting and there's the pecking order and things like that. But when you look at the overall market segment, right, blockchain is really tiny. Like it's really, really small in terms of like its total market cap, like how many developers are in the ecosystem. Like there are individual companies that have more developers than the entire blockchain ecosystem, right? We're really, really small, and the infighting is just unhealthy, right? We should all be kind of collaborating to mature this technology and grow it as much as possible. And I think by doing that, there is enough room for a lot of these projects to be successful at the same time. I think when I look at like Ethereum, for example, or Bitcoin and Neo, they all have very distinct value propositions. So I kind of think if we're using the analogies, I kind of think of it as like the Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander kind of a thing, where then I look at like Amazon, for example, or like Baidu as being like the Wartortle and the Charizard and Venusaur kind of a thing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the projects to differentiate and exist. And then I think as applications show up, they will pick one solution or the other or multiple based on what their use case is, right? I may need finality, for example, because I require that. I don't want the stochastic nature or like the probability that my transaction may be invalidated, right? I want 100% confidence in that. So I may choose Neo, for example, right? Or I may want to use a native storage solution, right? Or tool. So I may choose Neo for that, right? For me, I chose Neo originally because I really like the consensus protocol. I'm a fan of that. And I think, everybody in the community is very aware of this, but maybe outside they're not. But that protocol has also now become very, very popular within the industry. There have been multiple very successful platforms which use our protocol, which, we kind of take that as a source of pride, I think, that these other projects view us as being technological leaders on the consensus protocol front.
I should actually wrap up this session, but one thing which I felt was I was going through when I was going through all the questions and I was going through blockchain, different webinars and so much of content I went through. So one thing which came up to me, and as you said, so that provoked that thought. Blockchain as itself has too many applications. Okay, like it has too many applications. It can be used in various fields. It can be used to there was this particular comment that do you think blockchain as the way people have hyped it up in the monetary value, just like for the currency's sake. So people are somewhere down the line, people are forgetting about other applications also, like which are more useful. So do you guys think that there's a little hype when it comes to like the Twitter and the whole Elon Musk situation around the blockchain? Like
Uh,
not blockchain exclusively, more to be very specific, cryptocurrency. Like people think blockchain and cryptocurrency are same and they're forgetting about the other applications of blockchain. So do you think that this is something which is wrong right now and which is needed to be changed?
yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. I think the hype around cryptocurrency specifically can be healthy for the ecosystem because it does get engagement. When now, for example, pretty much everybody I know knows about blockchain. Whether they're aware that I work in the space is another question. But you know, my uncle, who's like 90, knows about blockchain and is like asking my relatives about buying Bitcoin, for example, right? So I think everybody knows about the technology. I think that's good, right? So there's awareness of it. I think one of the things that is an issue with it, though, and we saw this in 2017 and 2018, right, is that the reputation was not good, right? Our ecosystem had a horrible reputation, and that kind of ultimately that ended with a large devaluation in the space, which took years to kind of rebuild or fix. And a lot of that was reputation building, right? Where we had to regain the trust of the ecosystem, ours and the global ecosystem, to present a technology that's more mature. And then also, I think, self-regulated as well. Because we can't be known if this technology needs to be successful in an application where, and I'll use identity, where people are like trusting to have it for potentially very sensitive data and also very important data, like life, things that are a matter of life or death. I don't want to be using a technology for that is associated with scams or people stealing money or like the black market necessarily, right? I want it to be very rigid, robust, well-tested, respected. You know, I think it kind of depends, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's good that it's, you know, the hype of, you know, the market rising, for example, is definitely attracting interest in the technology. However, we need to make sure that that's tempered and it doesn't kind of go off the rails, right? You know, I definitely see in the general ecosystem, when the price is higher, we have way more developers in the ecosystem than when the price is low. When, you know, in I think winter of 2019, we had much fewer developers in the ecosystem than we do today, for example, right? And that's a global statement. That extends also into like the Ethereum community as well. At those events, the number of participants and the engagement is much lower when the price is lower. So I think it's good overall as long as the expectations are managed.
I hope that answers the question. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining today. And I hope each and every question was answered. And just in case if we have more questions, so we would ping you a bit. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys, for having. Do you want like for the last note? Do you guys want to say something? Joe, do you want to say something like on a goodbye note?
I think new to the moon.
So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, guys. So let's have a bite, and we can end the session right there.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Tyler, you were saying something.
That went well.
Yeah. So should we end it now then?
Sure. Yeah, I know that it's late there for you, Sparsh, and it's even later for
No,
Benny.
yeah.
So, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. It was good seeing you guys.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.